Many years ago, I worked for a company that specialized in background investigations. On my third day, I caught some dude, let's just call him Peter File, who was trying to work at a daycare center. The problem? He was a registered sex offender, being on the list for the sickest of reasons. While we'd all love to know, why isn't he in prison? The point is, your boy DH here earned his pay protecting the children of the world from the likes of Pete. You're welcome. Anyways, during Pete's interview process, I seriously doubt he went into great detail about his past. Point is, everyone has a history, and while most of us aren't horrible like Pete, no one's past is perfect. One's previous antics could ruin a current reputation, and those past actions could make you unsuitable for future reliability. Claiming you can be trusted around money, but you're hiding a past as a bank robber or extortionist proves your deeds to be nefarious. We all get this. When someone tries to hide their history, it raises some warranted red flags. This is why people go to great lengths to keep their history secret. You don't want the truth exposed. Does this translate to religion? Oh yes. Every faith has a history, an origin, the many players and happenings of yesteryears which require examination. If the founder claimed to be God's spokesman who discovered the ultimate truth, but had a history of defrauding people and was arrested for it, and also a polygamist who married 14-year-olds, this calls into question the truthfulness of his revelation. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses are newcomers to world religions, generally speaking, having only been around since the 1880s. So uncovering their history doesn't require archaeologists and scholars, just someone with a library card and access to Google. Even after a little digging, what you find is interesting to say the least. So much so that it should raise some pretty flashy red flags on the validity of their religion. The founders, painted as these great Bible students, actually weren't. Their claims and beliefs are filled with nonsense and paganism, and their behavior screams extortion. This information isn't available to today's Jehovah's Witnesses. Some events might be hinted at by their organization, but it's mostly glossed over or lied about. To get to the real truth, you need to research outside of the org, which leadership vehemently discourages. This ain't normal. Christians don't shy away from church history. Muslims speak openly about Muhammad's life, and many Mormons tend to embrace Joseph Smith and his 40-some wives. However, witnesses, with all their magazines, books, and websites, are pretty mum on the events that happened just over 100 years ago. Keeping one's history secret isn't a good sign, so let's see some true historical facts of Jehovah's Witnesses that JW.org doesn't want you to know. Starting with their founder, Charles Taze Russell. Now, if you go to JW.org, they'll say how much of a great Bible student he was, revealing the truth from God at the proper time. Is that true? Charles Russell was born in 1852, and as a teenager, he didn't like what he was hearing at church, like a typical teenager. So he got involved in the Adventist movement, listening to William Miller's doctrines on how Jesus returned invisibly in 1843, after using calculations from prophecies in Daniel and using the 7 times and the number 2,520. Sound familiar? Witness leadership doesn't want their members knowing their 1914 numerology was borrowed from another sect by their founder. Anyways, Russell eventually left the Adventist movement and started his own following. Then in 1879 began printing Zion's Watchtower. He started writing a series of books called Studies in the Scriptures. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses really believe Russell was a great study of Scripture. He started the movement to uncover the facts hidden for centuries from apostate Christendom. Everyone else just believed whatever the clergy told him. But Russell knew he learned through deep Bible research the truth. But unfortunately, history doesn't agree. For starters, Russell didn't know any Greek and admitted so under oath. In 1912, Russell filed a lawsuit in Ontario against a J.J. Ross for publishing a pamphlet calling out Russell as a false teacher. At one point in the trial, Russell was asked, "Do you know the Greek alphabet?" Charles replied, "Yes." Then he was handed a Greek text. When asked about a single letter, Russell reluctantly admitted he wasn't familiar with the Greek language, not even a letter's worth. Just gotta pause for a second. This is a theta. It has a TH sound. Theta. Theta as in theos, or God. Now say it with me, class. Theta. Congratulations, you now know more Greek than the great Bible student Charles Taze Russell. Now, the JW organization will try to address this, saying, well, he didn't perjure himself. So? The point is your boy wasn't as great as you make him out to be. This is silly. There were far more learned men and women in Charles Russell's time and throughout all history. They're right, he wasn't special, he just bought a really big printer. Which brings me to another subject, the false prophecies. Now, the Watchtower and the witnesses at that time recognized Russell as a prophet. They admit it. And yet he constantly preached the world was ending in 1914. At the end of 1914, what God calls Babylon and what men call Christendom will have passed away. October 1914 will witness the full end of Babylon. That didn't happen. Current leadership fails to mention these, instead explaining, nothing to see here, he was just a good Bible student, and he thought he was going to heaven. That's it. No! This wasn't an opinion, he preached it as fact. Like it or not, these are proofs. Did he claim to speak for God? Yes. Did he claim certain events were going to happen? Yes. And did those events happen? Say it with me. No! Therefore, Russell was a false prophet. This is why witness leadership today keeps this a secret. Deuteronomy 18:22 told the Israelites, if anyone claims to speak for God and foretells an event and it doesn't happen, he's false. He's not to be followed, and heck, you might consider stoning him and his beard. Another tidbit is a certain book, The Finished Mystery. His magnum opus, The Finality of His Studies in the Scriptures, Volume 7. It was published in 1916 after his death and widely distributed to witnesses as near required reading. I'm going to slow down for a second to really hammer this home. This book is complete and utter nonsense. It's not only unbiblical in every sense of the word, it's pure irrational insanity. Let me just read some in context. Here in chapter 9, he says that Bethel in Brooklyn was really the holy city of Jerusalem, the divinely appointed center for the harvest work. You just have to calculate the distance from Scranton to New York. After adding in the distance of some city blocks, and some train tracks, and some ferries, you multiply that by 1,200, and that kind of equals a stadia. I'm not kidding. Russell here is also claiming he's hearing things from God on what to write. Apparently God also told him to write this. The Great Pyramid confirms the Bible's teaching that the time of the harvest has come. I can't imagine why this isn't readable on JW.org. The current leaders have buried this book, knowing full well if any member read a single chapter, they'd immediately stop being a Jehovah's Witness. Yet the Bible in Hebrews 4:13 reminds us that all things are open before the Lord. I guess just not to their members. Now, digging into Russell a little bit further, you'll quickly uncover his fascination with the Egyptian pyramids. In the late 1800s, archaeology in Egypt was all the rage. Hieroglyphics were still unreadable, and the Giza pyramids were still among the tallest structures on the planet. Russell really dove in, seeing Giza for himself and writing about it. A lot. He said they were instrumental in calculating the end of the world. The 1914 date witnesses are all about. Russell claims the pyramids aided in this prediction. This was approved by the organization all the way up till 1928, 12 years after his death. Just to be clear, Jehovah's Witnesses rightly say the pyramids in Egyptian mythology, it's all pagan. Yes, yet these beliefs were interwoven within their origins for decades. Think about this. They didn't just believe it, it was taught as fact. Now, the Bible in James 3:1 actually warns teachers, saying they are under stricter judgment. I don't think God smiles on people teaching paganism. You won't find much explanation on JW.org, just a tiny snippet at the bottom of the page. They do, however, hysterically address the pyramid erected for Russell's gravesite. Jehovah's Witnesses do not revere burial places, but his grave is beyond a simple replica pyramid. In other words, gravesite, good witnesses don't care about those, but if you must, just ignore that replica of a pyramid, pay your respects and leave. Yeah, that simple replica, which has Watchtower Bible and Tract Society written on it, with their old emblem. Unfortunately, the pyramid was removed by the society a few years ago, but they can't remove it from the internet. Another secret you may or may not have heard about surrounds wheat. In the early 1900s, the Watchtower got involved in a controversy surrounding something called miracle wheat. It was sold as such, wheat that was highly productive and resistant to extreme weather and pests. The product was sold at the Witness Tabernacle for $60 a bushel, first to just members, then to the public. Obviously, this holy grain was just normal, thanks to a news article from the Brooklyn Daily Eagle, November 1st, 1916. They uncovered the truth, and the Department of Agriculture confirmed the wheat was only slightly above average. But more importantly is where it was coming from. Russell had been selling the exact same strand from one K.B. Stoner of Virginia. Stoner claimed his wheat was truly miracle wheat, God touched after he prayed for it. Except while Stoner was extorting people for $5 a bushel, Russell was selling it for $60. To put that into perspective, the cost for wheat by the bushel at that time was a single dollar. or $30 adjusting for inflation. Russell's miracle wheat went for 60 times more, which would have been $1,800 by today's economy. When asked about it, Russell just responded, "Well, God said he would produce wheat upon the earth, and this is what miracle wheat does." Except it didn't. There was no evidence. He just used Stoner's brand and marketing, selling it himself while admitting that Stoner didn't receive this by prayer. But the Watchtower brushes this off, saying, "So when the public press reported a new and unusual strain of wheat called miracle wheat by its original grower, along with a government report on it, some Watchtower readers contacted the grower, who was in no way connected with the Watchtower Society, and purchased some of the wheat. When theirs produced seed, they offered it as a contribution to the society." Except this is an outright lie. First, it was sold at the witness gathering place, the Tabernacle. Russell didn't just report on it, he set up shop. Miracle wheat was raised by Brother Bonnet. That's J.A. Bonnet. He was also responsible for the pyramid erected for Charles Russell after his death. Now witnesses will say, "Oh, but he donated all the proceeds." Yeah, to himself. Russell was the Watchtower. He started it. He owned 95% of it. He sold the wheat. It went to him, all to fund his preaching on pyramids and Armageddon happening in 1914. Look, it really doesn't matter where the money went. You never advertise a knowingly fake product for an insane amount of money and then sell it to your own followers who think you're a prophet. Anyone who does that is simply a con artist. Now, the Jehovah's Witness governing body has tried to distance themselves from Russell, claiming, "Oh, well, he's not really a founder, just a great Bible student." Except that's not how he was treated. They thought he was a great reformer, a prophet, the original faithful slave. What sinks this whole ship? According to Witness leadership in 1919, Jesus invisibly chose their organization alone as his one channel, since it was cleaner than all others. So let me get this straight. Failed prophecies, teachings that incorporate paganism, believing Jesus returned in 1874, defrauding people with a wheat scam, and publishing a book that can only be seen as pure, unbiblical, illogical nonsense. Yet, Jesus still chose them. Invisibly. All because the leaders say so. Look, if today's governing body was applying for a job to be God's one channel, they'd be sweating to death checking that box reading, "Yes, you can look into my background." It's just a fact. The Jehovah's Witness organization has a past they want kept secret. They need to hide it or lie about it, since even minimal digging exposes the organization as a fraud. You can't just claim, "I'm the source of truth because I said so." You need facts, and for today's governing body to do so, well, let's not kid ourselves. They ain't cracking open a history book anytime soon. The truth is, Jesus didn't choose them, and the evidence reveals the origins of this religion were established by untrustworthy characters, fraudsters, and beliefs that even today's witnesses admit are dripping with paganism. The Bible encourages people to test all things, but JW leaders don't like that. They'll preach, "Just test what we give you, and you already know it's true because we said so. It's okay. We've done the research for you." Ugh, no! Look, this is not a new concept, and high-control groups have been engaged in the same behavior for centuries. The average Jehovah's Witness isn't being fed the truth. The leaders are covering up their origins to protect themselves, lying about events, and silencing anyone who disagrees. In George Orwell's book 1984 about a corrupt system and leaders, he says it best: "Everything faded into mist, the past was erased, the erasure was forgotten, the lie became the truth." Thankfully, the real Jesus doesn't need anyone speaking for him. God used a lot of broken people, and still does, but it's not to point to them as the truth, only Christ. The call of Jesus was to come and see, test him, seek him, and you won't be disappointed. To have a relationship and saving faith in God doesn't require a group, an organization, or whatever. It's just between you and Christ. Putting your trust in his person and work is all that is required for someone to be freed from sin and receive a peace and deep-seated joy. Writers of the New Testament claim Jesus rose from the dead. They don't shy away, they don't hide, but we're proud to say that all our faith hinges on that historical moment. God wants us investigating, searching everything for the real truth, and if Christ was raised, then hope is real. A genuine faith opens the history book for all to see and says, "Test me." A false one and keeps it secret and locked.